Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boston University webinar on the programs in genealogical research. My name is Sarah, and I will serve as your moderator for today's session. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Please remember to ask your questions by typing in the questions box located on the right-hand side of your screen. We will try to address all questions towards the end of the presentation. Additionally, a link to the recorded version of this webinar will be sent for your reference and to share with colleagues. During today's presentation, we will cover our two programs offered here at BU, Genealogy Essentials and the Certificate Program in Genealogical Research, explaining the curriculum areas, instructors, and how to register. We will then wrap up with our interactive Q&A. It is now my pleasure to introduce Melindy Lutz-Byrne, Program Director of Boston University's Genealogical Research Programs. Melindy has helped develop and design the course and has served as lead instructor for about 9 years with a focus area in forensic research. She was former president of the American Society of Genealogists and is currently co-editor of National Genealogical Society Quarterly. Melindy is an accomplished author, editor, and lecturer, and brings a dynamic and engaging lesson to the classroom for her students. Melindy, thanks so much for joining us. I will pass the dialogue over to you in reviewing our programs.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and it is really a pleasure to be with you today and to see that there are 99 attendees and that many of you will also have access to this after it's been recorded. If you'd like to move to the next slide, please. Boston University has been at a number of conferences over the years, and we've just come back from Roots Tech, which was in Salt Lake City at the end of February and beginning of this month. And one of the traditions now is for graduates of the class to come to our booth and collect their ribbon for the beard on their name tags. And I had the pleasure of meeting with dozens and dozens of graduates and posing with a few pictures with some of them. We'll be next at the NGS conference in May in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and hope that some of you will join us there. Next slide. So today we'll be talking about our two courses, Genealogical Essentials and the Certificate in Genealogical Research. Next slide. So Essentials is a fun and compelling introduction on how to do basic genealogical research and gives you principles, begins with the idea of starting with what you know and getting very engaging examples going that involve things you know about personally, but you can investigate privately. It consists of 4 graded modules that are presented over 4 weeks. Next slide. The first module is laying the foundation, and all of the instruction is based on the genealogical proof standard, which is 5 different rules about how to go about solving and proving kinship. Next slide. Module 2 is tools and techniques, and you learn some very useful techniques that take you through databases that you may be familiar with already, but you may find that these reveal things you hadn't found in the past. Next slide. Immigration and evidence is a really interesting module. You have, by this point, learned a number of really strong skills. And one of the ways that people lose information about family is when a family immigrates or moves a considerable distance. And interestingly enough, the fact that they're doing that movement can often create records that preserve the information that's lost within the family, but it gets recorded at some official level. So you might find a passenger manifest that's actually written out at the port where people left from. So we have a number of cases that are described in the course, and this one follows a family from Europe to the United States through the port of New York. Next slide. And in discovering answers, you'll do further investigation through the GPS and some photo identification, which is very popular and very useful. Next slide. There are 2 textbooks for genealogical essentials, and they are useful well after you've completed the course. Next slide. Our certificate in genealogical research contains 5 modules, and like it says there, taught by nationally recognized experts, all based on the genealogical proof standard, and also tailored after the portfolio requirements for the certified genealogist credential from the Board for Certification of Genealogists. Successful completion of our course gets you a certificate from Boston University, but it also guarantees that you have the skill set to attempt the portfolio with cases of your own for the BCG. Next slide. People who've taken the class in the past, and we have over 3,500 graduates at this point, have a variety of backgrounds. We have a certain number who are college students currently, but the great majority of our students are accomplished people in other fields who are looking to meet standards and perhaps change vocations. And among the strongest areas are librarians, teachers, historians, anthropologists, people who are in archives, who are reference librarians or research related jobs. Quite a number of people are working on writing a book or an article, and they want the techniques that will make their evidence compelling and their proofs believable. We've had filmmakers, we've had spouses of interesting people like hip hop artists, and we have financiers. People use family and how you trace family as a useful way of finding organ donors and for donors to other purposes like development. And we, from the very beginning, have always had a lawyer in the class, at least one, always at least one. Next slide. While there are no hard prerequisites for the certificate program, there's some recommendations we have for people who hope to be successful. We want you to be computer literate, and you need to be able to move a PDF and attach it and upload it and some other very basic things. You want high-speed internet access. You want to be adept with English, and you need to have had some experience with records. If you've never been to a courthouse and looked at deeds or probates, or never requested a vital record from someplace, or never visited some of the major databases like FamilySearch.org, which is a free, very large database of genealogical sources, you should try to do that before you begin the certificate. Another good thing to be familiar with as you enter the certificate program is genealogical journals. Things like the National Genealogical Society Quarterly, the American Genealogist, the New England Historical and Genealogical Register. These publish articles that embody the kind of techniques we use to solve problems. And it'd be very useful for you to be familiar with how these things are presented. You might want to have done some research yourself. It doesn't have to be extensive, but you should have some idea of how you would start so that you can appreciate how the things we show you add to that. You might want to attend conferences or local meetings. And as I mentioned, databases are very valuable and easy to access these days. Next slide. Our 5 modules begin with foundations, and the difficulty level is a bell curve. So foundations is an easy introduction coming into our basic principles. There's a unit about report writing, and in this module you are assigned the one thing that might require you to go, well, does require you to leave the house, and that is you are assigned a repository report where you must go to some place near you that has an archive. It can be a vertical file at a library, it can be a collection of letters in an archive, but you need to interact with the record holder, like the archivist or the librarian, and choose something that has never been published before. It's not been digitized, it's not online, it's no place but in your hands. And you're assigned some simple things to write a report about. That report is due at the beginning of the 5th module, so you have months to accomplish this. And it turns out to be one of the most fun assignments in the entire class. Next slide. Module 2 is 4 weeks long, and it is thick with problem-solving techniques and all kinds of uses of technology. There are multiple cases that you see described and that you work on, and there's a very popular scavenger hunt where you can get extra points, and it's a very effective way to measure your skill and the speed at which you do some of your research and how reliable your results could be. Next slide, please. Our most difficult and 3rd module is evidence evaluation and documentation. This is the core of what we teach, and everything in it is very important. So we spend 4 weeks on it. We show you the qualities of evidence. We'd show you the differences in sources. Are they original? Are they derivative? Is the evidence direct or indirect? What are the qualities of these sources? And you are also taught what is a very challenging area, how to do complete and thorough citations that not only explain what it is that you saw, but also where you saw it and in what form. All these things are extremely important, and that's why this is at the peak of the bell curve of difficulty. If you get through this module, you will have learned a great deal. Next slide. 4th module is a 3-week forensic research module, and we address different topics each of the 3 weeks. The first week is devoted to air tracing and choosing a problem that interests you and describing your first steps to solve it. Next slide. The second unit in forensic genealogy is an autosomal DNA unit. We treat only autosomal DNA because it's just 1 week, and we cover 2 cases where the name of someone's parents are unknown. And we demonstrate in the first one how you go about solving such a case. And in the second case, you take a woman who is now in her 80s, who's given permission for her personal information to be displayed. And you see that the court ordered released documents that she got in the 1990s show her mother lying about everything, about her name, about the father's name, about where they lived, everything. And it's a good explanation for why this woman went for almost 30 years hiring private investigator after private investigator to solve this case, and they could not locate the people named in these documents. And with the advent of large databases of autosomal DNA, both the parents have been found now, and you work on that case. The final module unit in forensic genealogy is devoted to photo identification, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. Next slide, please. The last module is professional genealogy. It covers ethics very strongly. Parts of this were written by lawyers, and there's always been an attorney on the facilitating and academic professional staff. So the advice given here is very good, very strong. You see contracts, you learn about additional educational venues, and you also get a primer on what you need to do to become certified. And then again, you turn in your repository report, and there's an option where you can share with your classmates if you so desire. Next slide, please. We have 5 textbooks for the certificate program. These are all invaluable resources for after you've completed the course as well. It looks like a lot of reading. It really isn't. The things that we use specifically are very controlled. For instance, in the genetic genealogy and practice, that's just used in the 1 week with the autosomal DNA cases. And we study 2 chapters there. And their questions at the end and answers at the back of the book are invaluable, and you can go back and use that later. Next slide. We have several wonderful interviews that Mary Tedesco and Michael on the next slide have given us testimonials, how it made a difference in their careers. And Mary's a great example. You may have seen her on the PBS TV series Genealogy Roadshow. Actually, 2 of their regular hosts were part of the BU course. And next slide, please. Michael has gone on to do considerable work in genealogy and says good things about us as well. Next slide. I wanted to say just a little bit about the photo identification item in the forensic genealogy module, one of the things that I challenge the students in the class with is this picture. And I tell them, do you think that you could name all of these people if the only thing I tell you about this picture is where it was taken? And most people think it's a trick question. It really isn't. The answer is yes. And we do it step by step, a 5-step system where knowing where it was taken leads you to the names of the people. And in that week, you name these people, and then you get a picture of even more people, which is done for an assignment. And 99% of the people in the class answer it correctly and can name at least one of the people in the assigned picture. So there are some really interesting things, very compelling cases to work with, and I know you will enjoy them. So the next slide, please. This is our teaching staff. For Essentials, Julie Machuca is the sole facilitator, and she also does the very challenging Module 3 for the certificate course. Connie Lenzen is an established and very well-regarded genealogist from Oregon who does the introductory foundations course. She's been certified for over 30 years and has written many useful things that serve her well when she teaches. Allison Ryle teaches the problem-solving techniques and technologies module and is one of the cleverest people around a computer I've ever seen. In fact, in the days when this class was offered only on site, she was our lab assistant, and she would go in and prepare all the computers on our lab days. One day we went in and about half the screens were upside down. The display was upside down. And it didn't faze her at all. She just Googled upside down screen, figured out how to turn them right side up, and then went home and turned her husband's screen upside down, which is typical Allison and quite a lot of fun. I teach the forensic research course. Jennifer Zink is a very well qualified genetic genealogist who does some forensic research as well. She is a co-teacher with me. And Angela McGee, who is the founder and administrator of the ProGen study groups, the 18-month study of professional genealogy, one of our textbooks, runs the final module, professional genealogy. Next slide. So there's some technical things about the courses that I think Carrie Scott, one of our organizers here on the webinar, will take it away. Carrie.
Thank you, Melindy. So the program is an instructor-led program. As you saw on the previous slide, each instructor teaches to their area of expertise. One of the most important things I think all potential students should know is both courses are asynchronous. So there is no set time of day or day of week in which we require students to log on. If you do have any questions while you're in the course, you will be able to communicate with the instructors. As far as browsers go, Firefox and Google Chrome are recommended. And for those familiar with various online platforms for online courses, the platform that we use is called Blackboard. Next slide, please. The next session is right around the corner. It's going to be starting on May the 15th. The enrollment deadline is quickly approaching. I think we're less than a month away now. The deadline is April the 20th, so you do have between now and April the 20th to enroll in our May session. The tuition for the 4-week Essentials course is $775, and the tuition for the 15-week Certificate in Genealogical Research is $2,695. Both the tuition and the dates can be found on our website, genealogyonline.bu.edu. Next slide, please. We do have a 10% tuition reduction if you are a member of American Ancestors, also known as New England Historical Genealogy Society, NGS, which is the National Genealogical Society, APG, the Association of Professional Genealogists, and SCGS, the Southern California Genealogical Society. On our website, if you are to enroll in the May session, there will be a special promotional code for each one of these groups. You would simply take the code and use that, and the 10% will automatically come off for you. And I would like to answer this because this is usually a question we often get is, if you are a member of all 4 groups, it is just a 10% tuition reduction. Next slide, please. We do have a team here in Boston who is ready to answer any questions, big or small, that you may have. I want you to please feel free to email us, call us, or if you prefer, you can go right on the website. There is a lot of great information on our website, as well as you can live chat with a member of the enrollment team. And I will turn it back over to Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Carrie and Melindy, for the valuable information pertaining to the genealogical research programs offered here at BU. At this time, we will now start our live Q&A session. Just as a reminder, please type your questions in the question box, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. We do have a few questions coming in here, so I'll get started. Our first one, Melindy, if I could, I'll direct that one to you. This person would just like if we could reiterate just a quick sort of bullet point overview, some of the topics that will be covered in the Essentials course for beginners. Can you just give a quick citing of that, please?
Okay, these are very basic. It begins with laying the foundations, where we do discuss the GPS, which is the basic standards for doing solid genealogical research. We start with the principle that you begin with yourself and what you know, and we do things like run your own name through. Now, this is done privately. You don't share it with the class. You run your own name through various websites, and you see how you are represented in those websites and the data that's out there about you. And what usually happens is you find that you are associated with people whose names you've never heard of before. And it turns out, well, this is the team at the realtor's office that you may never have met, but you are connected to that realty because you bought a house, and indirectly their names are attached to your records. And you also find things that are just totally wrong, like your birth dates being misrepresented, or it says you're the same as somebody who lived in Chicago when you've never been out of Biloxi in your life. And it's a real eye-opener, but it does set the scene for you trusting but verifying almost everything you see after that. There are lots of practical examples that illustrate the 5 elements of the GPS, and I did say a little bit about the immigration module. These all flow to a point where you can feel comfortable doing research and knowing whether or not the evidence you're looking at is reliable.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Melindy, can you please go over the number of weeks that would be associated for the certificate program module 1? And then aside from that, how many weeks overall should be set aside for the total 15-week program?
It is 15 weeks, and you have access for 16 weeks. There's a quiet week at the very end. Module 1 runs for 2 weeks, as does Module 5. Module 2 and 3 are 4-week courses modules, and Module 4 is 3 weeks.
Great. And can you touch upon about how many hours per week one should set aside for the 15-week program on average?
The certificate course, people say between 15 to 25 hours a week. I have seen people do it in 8 hours a week. When we were in the classroom, you did it 7 hours a week in the classroom and about 3 hours during the week with homework. It's a little bit different for online because there's the temptation and the need even to study things more carefully and more slowly than it could be delivered to you by someone speaking in front of you. On the other hand, there's a lot of opportunity for you to understand how your research skills are developing and whether you go down rabbit holes in different directions and are being efficient or not. So learning from all those points, I think 15 hours to 25 hours, depending on your organizational skills and what you may know already going in, or what process you go through to let go of old habits if you're seeing that there are some new ones out here that'll be more helpful.
Great answer. Thank you. Carrie, can you please answer if this person's asking if they can get the books in a digital format rather than a hard copy?
So I'm going to first start out by students are responsible for purchasing the books for the course. Students are able to, I would say, give the books a search. We say to purchase them from any reputable bookstore, someone such as like a Barnes and Noble. You can do both traditional format as well as e-format. We do often encourage the traditional format just because sometimes with the e-formats, the pages will fluctuate and it can make reading assignments confusing.
Thank you, Carrie. Melindy, is there an opportunity to utilize personal family research as part of a project or coursework?
Yes, there's several opportunities throughout the 5 modules. We're talking about the certificate course again. Particularly if you have a fairly recent, like in the last century case, you can use it in Choose Your Problem in the forensic module. In fact, a lot of people bring really tough questions that they haven't been able to solve to that one, and it's a challenge for the teaching staff that we love, by the way. The more the better. So that's a possibility. There's also the possibility that you're looking at something that pertains to your family or your interests in the repository report. It's also possible to do this in the Module 3, where you have leeway in what you choose to write about in one of the evidence evaluation assignments. So there's usually at least one spot in each module where something that you personally have an interest in can be leveraged into the classwork.
Great, thank you. And I'll pass this one to you as well. Are there other professional certificates required or advised after BU to work as a professional genealogist?
Well, the gold standard right now is the CG, which is granted by the Board for Certification of Genealogists. And by finishing the BU certificate, you've experienced the skill set needed to successfully do their portfolio. What is left for you to do is to have your own casework that you have developed and answered yourself, which is one of the requirements for the portfolio. There's another certificate, a certification. It's called AG, Accredited Genealogist, which is done by another board in the US, and you are tested on your records knowledge for that AG because it's in specific areas. Like your specialty would be American tribes or something similar, and you would be tested on that in particular. There are undergraduate degrees offered by Brigham Young University, and there's an online one from Brigham Young out of Idaho. Very different from what we do. It is a branch underneath the history department there, and there are graduate level degrees available from Strathclyde and Leicester in England. Other than that, if there are a large number of people who've put out their shingle after completing the BU course itself, and many of them are pretty high profile. Most of them work towards further credentials like the CG or the CGL, the Certified Genealogical Lecturer credential. So yes, there is that, and there are other mini training programs called institutes that you could attend to get further instruction, but it doesn't give you a credential.
Wonderful answer. Thank you, Melindy. This one is also for you. Is there an opportunity with the Boston University programs to delve into some research for, say, Latin America, or particularly family members that have been a part of World War II or the Holocaust, beyond what Family Search Online might offer?
Yes, I think we are flexible in many regards, and my earlier answer about what you could bring to certain assignments applies to that. And you will find that almost every specialty imaginable is represented in our facilitator or academic professional staff. Myself, personally, I'm working very hard for the last 5 years on a Holocaust family, and I think that it would be wonderful if people with that sort of interest connected with the appropriate facilitator or academic professional while they're taking the class, because everybody's so interested in these areas. And so part of the advantage of getting to know your facilitators and instructors is that you may recognize that their specialty includes what you're interested in. And you've got 15 weeks of exposure to these folks. Go for it.
Thank you, Melindy. Carrie, this one is for you, and this person is asking, is there a payment plan available, and if so, can it be extended?
Okay, so there are a couple different options for paying the tuition of either course. For specific to yourself, I would recommend calling up our enrollment team. However, I can kind of briefly go over some general areas where both courses are eligible for a Sallie Mae student loan. That is a government-based loan where you would fill out an application. They would run your credit history, and they would approve you and let you know what sort of interest rate would be applicable. The other option is we do have payment plans available for the Essentials course. They range from a payment in full to 3 months, and for the certificate course, from a payment in full up to a 6-month payment plan. If you are looking for a payment plan for the May session, if you enroll during the month of March, it would be a 2-month payment plan where you pay half the tuition in March, the other half in April, and then the course starts in May. If you were looking for a longer payment plan, then I would suggest our fall session, where it's in September. If you enroll during the month of March, it would be a 6-month payment plan. If you enroll in April, a 5-month, May 4 months, June 3 months, July 2 months, and then in August it would be a payment in full. Again, payment plans are a bit hard to explain over the phone, so I recommend if you do have specific questions for yourself, definitely call our team, and we'd be happy to go over it with you in more detail.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And this one also for you, please. Are college credits available for the certificate course?
So the 15-week certificate course is classified as a non-credit, non-degree certificate course. So upon successful completion, you will get a certificate of completion from Boston University. I would suggest if you are trying to get college credits to speak to the college that you're currently attending to see if they would count this as credits at your school.
Thank you, Carrie. Another one for you. When is the next session after this May one? Because this person will not be able to enroll in the May session.
Sure. So we offer our online genealogy programs 3 times a year, every January, every May, and every September. So the next coming session after May would be September.
Great, thank you. And Melindy, I will pass this to you. So this person has done a lot of their own family research for some time now, and they're wondering if it would be more beneficial for them to take the Essentials beginner program first or jumpstart right to the certificate program.
That is an interesting question, and it's very personal to make the decision. If you are already familiar with the Genealogical Proof Standard, the GPS, if you have been doing research in records for a good amount of time, and when you think about needing to solve a certain problem, you have an idea of where you might start. You may be more certificate material than essentials material. We try to bring everybody along who makes the choice for certificate, but we do sometimes find that the basic knowledge needed isn't sufficient in some of our registrants. And one of the ways you can test this is there is a small test that you can self-select from that's available when you contact the marketing partner. Maybe Carrie could speak to where that's located so that you could see whether Essentials is better for you. It sounds like you might be more certificate material than Essentials.
Great, thank you, Melindy. Yep, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, sure. So if you would like, there is a genealogy quiz on our website. I like everyone to know this is a self-assessment tool for you. We do not keep track of your scores, but what we do is we recommend that when you have 30 minutes, we ask you to time yourself, when you have 30 minutes where you will not be interrupted, to sit down and take the genealogy quiz. If you're able to go through the quiz and get everything correct in 30 minutes or less, you're most likely ready for the certificate program. If you answer any of the questions incorrectly, or you take longer than 30 minutes, we recommend starting out with the Essentials course.
Perfect. Thank you, Carrie. And Melindy, this one is for you, please. Do most professional genealogists work on a freelance or independent contractor basis, or are there more standard jobs available for somebody in this profession?
You know, that's changing quite a lot in recent years. It used to be that genealogists were almost exclusively self-employed, although people would get positions in libraries or university research centers, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs used to employ genealogists and still does. A number of government functions have RFPs that genealogists will bid for, things like having finding the primary next of kin for the purpose of DNA testing to identify remains of missing in action or killed in action soldiers from foreign wars. That's been out there for 30 or more years, and is ramping up now so that more people participate in that. There are probably a dozen air tracing firms that look for genealogists who act as stringers, which is one of the things we describe in the forensic module. There are positions with lineage societies, some very well paying, and then there are the large genealogical research firms, many of which are in Salt Lake City, and many of which prospect among our graduates for their employees. Some of those jobs require you to be in a certain location. Others can be done from wherever you are online. And so there are now openings with potentially with genetic counseling, where this is useful. In our very first class, we had someone who was a organ donor locator for the Harvard Medical School, and he was taking the class to hone his skills for that. So while you wouldn't say he was a genealogist, he was using genealogical techniques to locate people. The autosomal DNA testing, all those companies that are doing that now are doing quite a lot of advertising, and it's created a big market for them to advise people who are taking those tests. And several of the companies have started hiring genealogists who can explain what's going on. So there are institutional places where you can get a standard job with benefits and retirement and the whole 9 yards, and more of those appear all the time. But I would still say that at least 50% of our graduates are hanging out their own shingle and doing a composite of different work for different companies or individual clients. There are many paths to economic reward with genealogical skills, and it's not just being a genealogist. It might be that genealogical techniques are just what you needed to turn over thought about somebody that you're writing a biography for. And we see it happen all the time.
Thank you, Melindy. And can you touch on some of the points again for the forensic module, please?
They're 3 weeks, and in the first unit, which is 1 week long, we talk about missing heirs and recovery of abandoned property and escheated estates. And we talk about cases that are modern. Forensic genealogy I define as the study of kinship and identity as it pertains to the law. And when you deal with living people, you've got all kinds of ethical and important logistical considerations that don't exist when everybody you're studying is dead. So we do a lot of discussion of ethics. You participate in discussions where you've got certain prompts. One of them is to look up the term missing heirs in quotation marks in a Google or a DuckDuckGo or whatever your favorite browser, your search engine might be, and write about one of the things you find there. The second unit is on autosomal DNA, and you do 2 cases of people whose parents are unknown, and you see how it's done, and then you do it yourself. And in unit 3, we do 2 pictures where the only thing you're told is where the picture was taken, and you name the people in the pictures.
Great, thank you. So in this particular module, is this where you would discover or uncover truths and reveal things about, say, fabricated certificates within a family?
That is part of the ethical discussion, and it comes up repeatedly throughout the entire course. You know, just because you can do this kind of work does not mean you should. And there are all kinds of red flags that you need to pay attention to, especially when you're dealing with living people. So there are some genealogists who will tell you that there is a price to be paid for knowing the truth and keeping a secret. On the other hand, there are cases, and we talk about some, where the truth could be devastating. And there are cases where you can't avoid the truth being devastating. So we talk about what the most ethical way to treat these things are. And while we don't tell you what your ethics should be, one of the goals in that module is to get you in touch with where your ethics are, because some people will find certain parts of that module very distasteful and others will find them absolutely invaluable. And there is room for all those opinions.
Great, thank you, Melindy. And Carrie, I will send this one over to you, please. Are you considered to be a part-time student of BU when you enroll in either program?
You are not.
Thank you. All right, we have quite a few questions here and just a few minutes left in our Q&A session, so I've already got some great questions coming in. One here for you, Melindy. Could you maybe give some insight into what the salary range might be for someone who works in the genealogy industry as a researcher?
Well, most of the salaries are connected to an hourly rate. I know that people in the big companies in Salt Lake City are pulling down 6 figures a year, and this was also true of a number of people in my position who are doing 5 and 6 different clients or focuses per year, and so you can be very comfortable. I put my kids through college, no problem at all. For those who start out with their own shingle, depending on your location and your specialty and how quickly you work and what area your interests are in, you choose a hourly rate, multiply it by 3, and that's what you usually ask when you do a job interview, I guess you'd call it. Somebody comes to you and says, I have this problem, what will it cost for you to solve it? And that's one of the hardest things for almost anybody to do, because every problem is unique and you may see ways to solve it, but until you actually do it, you don't know whether those ways will work and what tangles you might find. So in my experience, people will say, I take a retainer for 3 hours to 10 hours to 20 hours, and we'll report back, and here's what you get in the report, and you describe exactly it. This is covered pretty well in the contracts part of Module 5. But the contract spells out what you will do for what the client will pay. Many of the positions with lineage societies would run in the $30,000 to $45,000 a year income, and I can think of a number of library positions that this is the value added thing that a reference librarian uses to get an additional 10 grand a year added to his or her salary. There is a pretty strong market for genealogical lecturers, and they are paid about $250 an hour for a presentation. Some of the better known ones get up to about $1,000 an hour, depending. And then you've got the BU program itself, which hires from its graduates for the most part for facilitating jobs. We've currently got a staff of 37 facilitators, most of whom are have graduated from the course. So that's a range. I would guess that most BU certificate holders wouldn't start lower than $40 an hour when they quote to clients, and the higher end for that's around $150 an hour.
Perfect answer, Melindy. Thank you. And our last question today, just because of the time allotment here, comes in about the actual material presented during the course. So because this is an online course, what is the lectures and the video content like, and will we be able to talk to our instructors directly if we have questions?
Well, there are some opportunities for live classrooms where the academic professional is allowed to call a group. These are usually recorded, sometimes they are not. So it depends on your availability whether you can attend it. And we do have students from all over the world, so the time zones can be very challenging. The live classrooms are at the option of the academic professional. There are a few videos that are recorded. There are some recorded webinars, but the live interaction is mostly asynchronous, as was described before, where you post a question in the Ask the Instructor board, and once a day these are all gathered and combined where people are asking the same question, and then in an announcement the next morning those questions are answered. So there's always the option that you can discuss things in the water cooler with your classmates, which is one of the great advantages of this course. You have so many very interesting people to interact with, and there are even options to do that after the course. But you can also instant message it's internal message actually. It's like an internal email. You can pick which instructor or facilitator you want to ask a question of, and when they're on duty they can answer you. So you can have some very meaningful discussions back and forth in those manners, and some of your academic professionals will even extend their personal contact if it's a case that you want to discuss with them after the course. You're pretty busy during the course with the material that's there, so that is sometimes a good option to wait till after.
Great, thank you for that very insightful answer. That will bring us to the end of our webinar today. And just for those who might have missed the beginning portion of our presentation, a recording of this presentation will be sent to all registrants following the webinar in an email, so watch your inboxes for this. Again, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. We hope you have taken away some valuable course information to help guide you in your education decision. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day and a happy weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.